My name's David Fricke. I'm a writer. I write for Rolling Stone, but more important, I have been listening to Rory Gallagher's music since I was 15, 16. The first time I heard Sugar Mama on the radio in Philadelphia in late 68, early 69. And to see this, I got to see Rory a lot in the 70s and 80s. It is one of the great things I can take away from my life in music and as a writer, but to see him on stage was astonishing. Anyone who's here who knows that knows exactly what I'm talking about. But this is a really amazing film because you hear and see him at a point in his life when he is just taking off. And it's very rare to see a film like that where you're actually seeing a breakthrough performance. This is a show that, if it had been at Woodstock, if it had been at Monterey, it would have catapulted him to superstardom. Instead, the fucking band breaks up. And I can't think of almost a more suitable metaphor for Rory's approach to career development.
Yeah.
Before we get into some of the specifics about the film itself, did your dad or Rory, did you ever get a sense that they walked off stage and thought, you know, this isn't such a good idea. You know, maybe we were a little too hasty. There are 600,000 people out there and they really liked what we did.
From what my dad has told me, that they were just, the manager was there, and as you can see in the film, it's kind of a bit crafty.
He looked like bad news, yeah.
He's a little crafty, and I think I don't think they really stopped to think about it. They played Montreux the next night, so they were straight away off to, I think the Doors had pulled out of headlining a show with Black Sabbath in Montreux, so Taste went in headline.
Is that the same show that was released as Live at Montreux?
Yeah.
Okay, so actually they recorded 2 live albums in 2 days.
In 2 days. Well, they didn't know they were being recorded on either. And the band had already split up, and then both those albums came out after the band had split up. The manager sold them to Polydor, and Polydor put them out, and Taste never saw a penny of anything. Well, they never saw a penny of anything at that time. The manager had it all. So I honestly, going back to the original question, I don't think they had a chance to think about it. They were straight away on a bus, probably knowing how kind of cheap they were, how poor they were at the time. They probably drove all the way to Montreal.
Swam all the way to Europe. Did he ever talk about the effect of that performance? That it meant anything special to him? He was on the road constantly his entire life, you know, all through America, Europe, everywhere, and yet that performance, I remember reading about it in, you know, the English papers at the time when you could pick up Melody Maker and stuff, and people just going, wow, and then gone.
The thing that I've picked up on, there was a huge amount of regret over Taste, and I think that moment probably made that even more intense. I think his first 2 solo albums have lots of songs that they sound like breakup songs, but I think they're all about Taste and losing what was his. You know, he really, you know, he wasn't planning to be Taste and then Rory solo. He didn't have. He wanted Taste to be his band, and I think you hear that little bit before they walk on stage where he's just, you know, it was so powerful for them, and they kind of, you could tell that there was that building up attention. They knew they were getting there because all across Europe they were selling out everywhere. And like he says, it was just the press that weren't talking about them as much, and then suddenly they do talk about them and they break up.
Because there's also one moment in the film, I think it's on the second song, where he sort of turns, he's doing his thing, and he suddenly turns to John and just goes like this with his fist, like harder, harder, harder. And the way he's captivated and catapulted by what he's doing, you know, it's almost as if, you know, you see a lot of guitar players and they're very aware of where they're trying to go and what, you know, the course of the improvisation and the way the band is jamming. But half the time he looks like he's on Mars. You know, his eyes are closed, his mouth is half open, you know,
there's
like he's gasping.
In Catfish where, like, he hits a chord and he kind of, his eyes are closed, and then one of them starts opening on its own. He's like, it looked a bit demonic, but it's just, he's so in the moment playing. And those two, Richard and John, bass player and drummer, just incredible musicians. And I think probably the band that Rory could push himself and the boundaries of what he could play more than any other band. But to no detriment of his other musicians. He had wonderful musicians, but there was just something with those three guys that they. And when Rory would kind of do something and challenge them, they were right back on his toes, like at the end in Catfish.
Well, that thing in Catfish where he's like hunched over next to John and they're just like hammering together. It's almost like one drum kit.
Yeah, he pounds on John a lot and kind of really kind of faster. I mean, he's always, you hear during the film, even when he's sort of in a zone, suddenly he'll sort of say like write down or write. He's still got a band leader thing going, and his guiding of the group is incredible.
But it's interesting, that comment, I wasn't expecting Larry Coryell in a film like this because he's coming from a different genre, but I know that he made some really great power trio records in the 70s, and his comment about if you had taken the drums and the bass out, this was like free jazz, is actually very true, because you listen to the way he's playing, he's dealing with the harmonics and he's riding just like the top edge of a note, shaking things and that shivery thing that he would do. It is very much, it is free improvisation, but it's also within the context of these very basic, slow, heavy blues structures. It was completely unlike anything any other power trio, Cream inspired or Blue Cheer inspired at the time, was doing. Yeah, they were just off on a whole other plane. And
the tempo changes are all over. There's moments where he just decides to start tapping his guitar and he's deciding, I'm going to speed this up to this.
Well, when he goes to double time in Catfish, and it's actually cool because he's talking about, well, I got 2 trains running, and none of them are going my way, and so he just ups the tempo so that it's basically, I'm going to make my own train. Yeah. And just they take off, and and that wasn't even the last encore.
No, there was.
There were 2 more.
There was 2 more. Yeah, the last track, "Feels So Good," was. It's kind of the film is in a different order to the actual set, the album CD, which is coming out.
There's actually 2. I think there's 3 or 4 more tracks that are on the CD compared to the DVD.
Yes.
Yeah. So you get the entire set on the DVD, so you actually get more of this stuff.
They came back out. They did. I'm trying to remember the exact word. Blister on the Moon is the very final one.
Blister on the Moon is the last.
Which is a great. You hear on the record. Rory kind of goes, "All right, they told us we've got no time left, so we're going to do a very short one," and then makes a 2-3 minute album track into 9 minutes at the end. He kind of in good Rory style. That's my other thing. I love because he just doesn't know how to end a song. Every time you think they're about to end, they kind of have another 3 minutes left in them somewhere.
The obvious question is, why did it take not just 45 years, because obviously Murray had to wait, 27 years just to get the Isle of Wight film out. But what was the extended delay for something like this? You've had the Leonard Cohen film has been out, the Hendrix film has been out, a number of the Who's set, a number of sets and shows from that festival are, at least this one took,
it's a long time, and it's a lot of.
The band was only together 3 years, and it took them 45 years to get this out.
Maybe I have a guess at that answer.
Okay.
Because Eagle Vision has been really complicit to 2 strands of filming, really. One, we've been involved with a whole series of the Isle of Wight films.
Right.
Personally, starting with the making of the film Message to Love, which I produced at Castle Communications. And then I've been working with Murray doing 8 films over the period of time, this being the 8th. And then also I've been working with Daniel Gallagher at Eagle Vision over about 8 titles also that have got nothing to do with the Isle of Wight, but it's kind of the confluence
of the 2. Great Montreux box, which is just...
Well, we did the Montreux. Yeah. Incredibly successful too. So I guess it's the relationship that Eagle has with both Murray Eliot from the Isle of Wight and with Daniel Gallagher from, obviously, the Gallagher camp that's fused together in this film. And I think the timing is very good.
But was there an attempt to get it done sooner?
Originally, I think Murray made an edit of just the concert. I think with Ina, who's here, who's the editor, he did a brilliant job of it.
And that's got Cinnaboy.
So I think, in '95 I was still in school, so it's about 2005, 2008, around that time I saw that and I was like, why am I not putting this out?
Yeah.
And then I spoke to my dad, and then he kind of warned me off Taste. There's so many legal battles, I think, through the 70s and 80s.
Because
first,
of management?
the manager took everything, and then Taste weren't actually signed to Polydor, who all the albums came out through. The manager was. And then the manager had deals with the three guys.
Oh, that's old school.
And so he got all the money. No one ever got anything. So no one wanted to talk about it for, let's say, till 1980.
Yeah.
And then Rory started trying to do things to get everything back. And I think once they kind of got someone with Polydor, I think it was in '99, they just wanted, I think Polydor did the best of, and then we said, oh, we should, there is this film, and, Eagle, and we can do it with them or yourselves. And then Polydor kind of ummed and trying to get them to do it because they own the exclusivity on Taste as a band. And then, so it took a number of years to get them to agree to allow us to do it. Then there's, who was Murray supposed to film it? Did he give permission? Which we kind of got from my dad that he did. And then was whoever recorded the sound, who actually owned that. It's a 70s nightmare of legal things. But we got there in it. We got this last year or two, we've, Eagle and all ourselves have just been, I think in the end we're just like, right, forget it, we're making it. And then we'll deal with everything as and when it comes, and we've got it done.
How would you characterize the state of the films and the audio track? Because actually one of the things that's interesting is you look at, that very old way of recording sound for film with two microphones wrapped together with gaffer tape, which is, it looks like two Dixie cups and a thread. What sort of state was the material in over all that time, whether it's the audio or the film or what?
It's reversal. It's 16 millimeter reversal stock, which has aged beautifully, as you can see. It looks like it was shot yesterday. And that period of audio tape doesn't age either. You don't have to bake it.
Was it 8-track?
Yeah, 8-track 1-inch.
They had two machines running at the same time.
Oh, okay.
In the same...
right, so that, they cover the gaps when they're changing reels. And the actual physical state of the tape was perfect. Now, the actual quality of what was recorded there were issues because of just microphones buzzing and things like that it took a while to clean up. But you could. I don't think they could have done this back then. When you hear the earlier things, the technology wasn't there to do all the fixes and really make it as good as it could be until the last couple of years.
Did it sound as visceral and close just on the original tapes as it does here? Like, how do you, in a way, you sort of try to take the effect of that visual and make it feel like, like what it would sounded like in the PA. It's interesting because you look at that audience, much of the audience is further back because there's all those rows of chairs with, I guess, that were set aside for people like me who didn't show up. Although I would have been there. But nevertheless, you have all of those people further back and up on the hill, and they're totally into it. Now you wonder, what were they hearing? Because obviously the quality of PAs back in the day was, having been to Woodstock, a little dodgy.
From what I've read, actually, it sounded better on the hill, even further back, the way that the sound traveled. So a lot of people were even people that had bought tickets went up there to get better sound, even though it was further away.
And it's funny as well because you just look at their setup. Like Rory's got a Vox AC30 about this big on two fold-out chairs, tiny drum kit. The film, you see a little bit of it when it cuts back to my dad saying, well, which band have I got tomorrow?
Yeah.
It's him. The bass amp didn't work out when they walked out on stage, so they had to replace the bass head. And there's a bit of footage of Donald changing the thing. So just nothing, they just shouldn't have been able to play to that many people and anyone hear them. And somehow it worked. And Geldof, and I've had other people, Mark Jessett, who did the artwork for it. He was there at it. He was 15, and he just said that the sound, they just sounded incredible. Maybe because they didn't have 20 stacks of Marshalls and everything else.
Well, because there's one thing about the AC30 is just the single amp, so there really wasn't as much bleed. I'm sure with the Who, that must have been a nightmare to mix because this is just the one.
Or
amp,
Hendrix with his wall cabinets and.
Yeah, so there was no bleed of the guitar into the bass amp, if that,
Because you actually hear the detail in his harmonics and overtones is really incredible. It's like when he was touring in the States, when I would see him in the 70s and then into the 80s, you know, people would talk about he was a great blues guitarist, which was all very true, and a great soloist, and very exciting to watch on stage. But the thing that nobody really talked about, and maybe it was because, you know, it wasn't on people's minds, but just like his use of harmonics and overtones, and the way that was actually a dramatic and melodic part of his improvising, you know, much more so than the notes, or just the order, or the flow of them. There was really kind of like a depth and a height, actually, to his improvising that really comes through.
I mean, the pinch harmonics, which, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I haven't heard many people do them before he did.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, yeah, 21, and to get that, you have to really, like, bite the pick and your thumb into it and pretty much rip it, and he just doesn't, he just kill, I mean, that's why that guitar's got no paint left, he just attacks it.
Is that the same guitar I would have seen in the 70s?
Yes.
So he just played that
Every,
four beat up Strat for like ever.
Forever, yeah. And it's, my dad has it, and it's still, I mean, it's honestly, when you see it, and there's much less paint on it now. I mean, after another 20 odd years of killing it on stage, I think there's one from Montreux on the DVD, and he drags it just across stage by its cord and just breaks the pickup in it and everything. He just, but it's a work of art, just how the grooves and the lack of paint, and it's even on the back of it, it's dyed blue from his denim, because he's always wearing jeans.
Yeah.
Just 30 years of sweating jeans into it, it's just dyed the back of the Strat blue, which is incredible to see.
Were there any other sort of technical issues you had to address to get it to be this vivid, both orally and visually? You know, because actually the whole viewing experience of DVDs and Blu-ray and whatnot, you know, it's changed a lot since, you know, I saw Woodstock and, you know, Saturday afternoon matinee, you know.
It was a lot of constant level changing, because the recording guys, it wasn't like they set the levels and said, okay, now we got it, let's just sit down. And they were still changing it through pretty much every song. So Daniel and I sat there, I remember one night, just writing like every other word for hours, just to, you know, to get it all to sound smooth.
Because he didn't spend a lot of time right in front of the mic.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing.
He would come back and turn his head.
So I didn't want to do that with compression. I wanted to, you know, have it be, you know, real and natural. So it was a bit of level riding.
Yeah. We had the biggest issue, I think, for all the audio recording was it was in their monitors. There was a with everything they did, every note, every vocal.
Oh, yeah.
It was just. And so we just went through and unced it as best
we could. Every time Rory would be playing and they weren't, it would vibrate through the, you know, the mics, their amps would vibrate, it would come through the bass player's pickups. So we would have to like constantly, you know, be muting in between, and you know, it was.
Well, at what point did you feel that you needed that preamble to both the band and also Rory's early life in the show bands? Because I think it's actually a good context. If you had just come out with the show the way, say, the Hendrix film is, or the Who, you know, which has some of the festival preamble, but this actually is interesting because it really gets to an early part of his life and how that really led to that moment. And obviously, there's a whole other life after he walks off stage, but it was actually really kind of cool to and also to see him talk about it, the show bands and that part of Irish music culture in the 60s.
I mean, I think the thing that, to begin with, we were knowledgeable that Rory's name is well known, but taste, not so much, even among a lot of Rory fans. Because I asked Johnny Marr, I said, "Oh, can I interview for this film about, you know, taste?" And he's a Rory head. He doesn't know taste. He's like, "I can't wait to see the film because I can learn something about them." But I couldn't do an interview. Yeah, I took that. And so it's those kind of things that you realise that you have to kind of give some sort of background to the band, and then, you know, obviously then breaking up before they're going out adds the drama to it and actually heightens the film a little bit as well. I think that piece really helps you understand like what this band was going out, and where Rory had started. Like you say, like just, you know, hearing Muddy Waters one night, 10 years later, playing at the Isle of Wight is fantastic. Sort of, I think transition to watch through that.
Well, it was also interesting. At one point, I guess they decided, you know, the big move to get into the music industry was to move to Belfast, which, you know, it doesn't immediately come to mind. It's not like you're moving to L.A. or moving to New York, but it seems like that was important
It was because, well, Cork, I mean, in Ireland, everything was run by the church at the time. If you want to go to a dance, the show bands had all the church halls, and all the managers of the show bands owned the halls, and then they'd have the priest there who'd run it. And so if you wanted, Rory couldn't just go and have a band and go and play around the country. You just weren't allowed, one, that he wasn't in a show band, and two, that I think the musicians union turned up one night and you had to have at least 5 members. So my dad tells a story that he and a bunch of other friends pretended to borrow, they borrowed some saxophones and stuff and pretended to play behind Taste just so they could play on stage because they were too few members. So that's Ireland at the time, you know. Yeah. So the only, I think Dublin had a bit of an R&B scene. Cork had Rory, and that was it at the time. And then Belfast, Van Morrison had really...
Well, that was it. Yeah, he had the Maritime Club, because I interviewed him recently about them, and how, you know, even for him, as he said, you know, in late 63, just as he was going to start them, you know, for him, even the decision was you either played traditional folk music or you were in a show band. And so in order to beat either of those alternatives, he started the Maritime.
Yeah.
And I guess Taste actually played
and
there.
That was essential for them, for Rory. I mean, Van did it, and I think sort of kind of Rory went, well, that's how, you know, the first and only to do it in Ireland, and Belfast. And he's like, right, well, I had to go up in Belfast and do the same thing Van did. Got to his club, and that's Eddie Kennedy was managing the club at the time. And so yeah, Rory went there, and as you see in the film, they had to change out bass player and drummer. Whose decision that was, Polydor or the managers, I'm not exactly sure, but it was, I think at the time it was the only place with any kind of blues scene in Ireland. And then because Eddie Kennedy had the bands coming in like Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac and people like that Rory could actually play with and find out and kind of get word back to London that he could. There was a kid in Ireland that was playing well as well, you know, and so he could get over and get the shows at the Marquee. I just don't think it would have happened for him if he'd stayed in Cork. Yeah. He could have maybe gone straight to London, but they got a lot of. There was what's the best? In London, there was a lot of sniggering about an Irish band playing blues.
That's so British.
Which is, you know, and yeah, which kind of, you know, British guys playing blues. You know, they're obviously, you know, they've worked in
that's so
fields,
American, you know.
So there was a lot of that, and I read a lot of reviews and things like that when they first started playing. And I think this guy who was managing Fleetwood Mac at the time, they supported them in Denmark, and then the crowd just went nuts for Taste and didn't go so nuts for Fleetwood Mac. And kind of, well, you guys like that, well, you're obviously not very educated in the blues and that sort of stuff. Maybe because they're a bit heavier or whichever, so I think maybe it did take doing all those gigs with everyone else up north, like Cream, in Belfast, that when they did come over, people go, actually, no, you can't sort of say, oh, what's this Irish blues thing? Yeah. They were actually really good. You know, they had that.
Did Polydor or the management ever consider recording them prior to the Isle of Wight, live?
Not that I know of, no. It's another thing.
Because I know the new Universal box set has material from Sweden at the, I guess, Swedish radio.
Yeah, Swedish radio.
And there's you know, BBC sessions and such, but for such a dynamic live band, it's almost like they didn't get recorded live enough. There's one recording from the Marquee, which is the first lineup of Taste. And I actually think that was done because Polydor were thinking about signing them, and so they had the gig recorded so that Polydor could listen through. So that's also in the box set as well, I think. I don't know why. I mean, I wish there was more. I mean, we were scouring for the intro piece, trying to find even more footage of them. Yeah. And we found some very crazy German footage of an old Nazi shooting them, And it's not even their drum kit. It's a band called Blossom Toes. Yeah, it's not even their kit.
It was a very odd show called P3, and there was P1, P2, P3, P4, and each one had a different set of English groups, and it was a very odd German director. And I got sent P3, and it's the bonus on the DVD and Blu-ray. It opens with this guy showing you around his small house, and there's pictures of Hitler on the wall and his gun collection, and then he's playing with toy tanks and things, and then he's in a rocking chair with a rifle, and the next minute he's shooting Taste, and it's cutting to them playing. And we saw that, and when we showed it to Murray, and
Murray
Murray was like,
"That's the
opening!" Just like,
He just loved it.
It goes on, and there's a later bit where there's like a what's going on video, and it's a banquet table with lots of rich Germans eating just copious amounts of meat. And while little children go and beg around them, and then it cuts to Taste in another room playing, and then there's the other bit that you saw, a bit of them playing in a big dump.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. People are like scavenging for food.
It's all the rich people
and the
from the
band's
banquet.
called Taste.
Yeah, it's the rich people from the banquet are then out killing each other over the rubbish left over. It's cool.
Very proto MTV.
Yeah.
Very proto.
Is there other material that Murray has that is releasable on other bands? Just to step away from Taste for a minute,
Yeah.
What else is there? Because you look at it was a 5-day festival.
Right.
Well,
this
I
isn't even-
said earlier that we've so far got through making 8 films. So we're still
had about 50 people
going
playing.
back to the well with Murray
Yeah.
to see what else we can do. In fact, we were going to be talking about it tonight had he been here. But,
Well, you can talk about it.
well,
I
I haven't done the deals yet with the talent. So I think it'd be
We won't tell them.
premature to say that. But I mean, you can see who was on at the
Yeah.
Isle of Wight in 1970 and figure out just who might be eligible for. I mean, I've been trying to get Joni Mitchell to approve an edit that Murray did some time ago for quite a long while, but unfortunately she's not too well at the moment. But Joni's performance is fantastic with the Isle of Wight, and certainly worthy of film in its own right. And then there's the classic Doors performance.
Yes.
And the only thing that's really been keeping us back, because Eagle also has a visual deal with Jeff Jamble, Doors management, which is also, so far, I think we've released 5 Doors films on Eagle Vision. Well, we really want to do the Doors at the Isle of Wight too. But I've been waiting for technology to catch up, because it was in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
the,
they didn't
Doors.
use
And
the lighting wasn't that
was
good.
not that
Yeah.
great. So I've been thinking, all these great new technological developments. That by the time we get around to Murray finally doing it, there'll be some technology which will deal with that light deficiency problem.
Yeah.
And you could go on. There's quite a lot of other artists that are eligible.
Cactus.
Yeah.
Cactus,
That's his pet baby. Murray
Right.
recommended for working for him non-stop. You work for him pretty much 24/7 in the hope that you could put the Cactus film out.
Waiting for interest to spike.
I was at the Message to Love premiere 20 years ago,
Yeah.
trailing behind him saying, "Mary, what about this group Cactus? How come they're not in the film?" And I'd been chasing him for all these years, and so that's sort of how I ended up working for him.
Wow, so this is really all about eventually getting a Cactus film. This is all creative.
He gets
Getting a
paid
Cactus
per
film.
frame of Cactus. Once a week he gets given a different frame of Cactus film. It's nearly there.
Yeah.
What else is there on Rory, Taste? What is left that we don't know or haven't seen or you haven't found yet? There have been, a number of DVD boxes, like the Great Montrose set is the Beat Club, the BBC Sessions disc, this, various other reissues. What else is there that we need to know but we haven't gotten yet?
There's a wealth of BBC stuff that I need to dive into, both visual and audio-visual. Visual and audio. And so it's kind of scouring through that. There's obviously, he just didn't stop playing live, so there's a trillion live concerts that, if everyone wants them, we'll have to go through and make it and find a way of giving them to everyone. I think an online site or something like that for aficionados who just want to get that.
Because he did a lot of radio concerts in America.
Mhm.
That was one of the things that he was very, very, I was actually just listening to a bootleg I've got of My Father's Place, 1974, which is a burning gig.
Mhm.
So, yeah, please.
I keep them coming. Yeah, everyone. There's a Cowtown Ballroom thing that people say. That's a 3-4 hour gig that just doesn't stop. Yeah, it's and you just kind of. I think it's amazing that with the songs that I don't think he ever played live any other time, and it's just because they just wouldn't let him off the stage. So that's another great one. There's I'd love to find more Taste stuff. Every so often, just something will come completely out of the blue. I saw out of nowhere this Very badly edited, but a German Essen Pop and Rock Festival 1969. They have I saw one track from that. I Feel So Good, and someone filmed it, and there's one clip from it. So I've got to try and find the rest of it. It's just digging. A lot of places in Europe, like Germany and Sweden, have exceptionally well. Their sort of state broadcasters would keep and do keep things very well, especially in comparison to the BBC and other places. And so it's really calling them all up and saying, can you search a database for Taste and Rory Gallagher and try different spellings and all this sort of stuff. Sometimes that's just how it is, you know. You have to keep trying them, and they've listed it somewhere else, and they put it in Gallagher and Lyle, and you've got to dig it out that way. So.
Did he know how good he was?
I think at this point he did, because he had I think this album, this performance through to Dukes, he had a sort of young man's. Rory was never arrogant, but you could see that he knew he was on the top of his game. Yeah. And I think it's some of my favourite sort of stuff to watch, the Beat Club sessions as well. If you watch that and some of the stuff he plays there, he just, I call it arrogance because I wouldn't dare, I don't know many other guitarists that would, to just hold a feedback note for 30 seconds and just like everyone, there's however many hundreds of thousand people, and I'm just going to do that. And just keep holding it. And just everyone else be, what's my next line? What am I singing next?
I got to show him some stuff, and what he does is there's that one moment in the film where he's holding that note, and it's just like shimmering, and he doesn't move. The band's not doing anything. He's just like eating up all of the air, and he's not even it's not even riffing or licks. It's just like pure harmonic, dynamics.
Yeah. I don't think you could do that if you didn't know you were supremely confident in what you were playing. And I think at that period, I think later on, towards the end, while he was still playing brilliantly, I think he definitely got doubts in, because I think he really hoped and thought, and it was happening at this point, that he was getting huge success by just doing what he thought he should do, playing live and making albums, and not having to do singles, and not doing promo tours, and going out with Brett Eklund and all those things that he, to try and get famous. Yeah. And it was really happening, and and then just the end of the 70s and into the 80s and 90s, that success just didn't happen for what he deserved that he put into it. Yeah. And I think he would have had a little sort of dent in his confidence there. And it's because he's probably currently more popular than he was, at the end of the 80s and in the 90s, before he passed away. And now kids wearing T-shirts. There's the Ballyshannon Festival where there's 10,000 people every year coming to hear him play his music, and it's fantastic. We just hope that he kind of gets to from up there gets to see it, or whichever. There's so much love for it. I mean, I don't know many other artists that didn't have a number one single or whichever else that still have statues and streets and everything named after him. It's quite impossible.
I got to meet him once, and it was interesting because I got to have my picture taken with him backstage, and he seemed very shy. It was you saw that power and that drive at the mic and as he played, and then we went back. This was at the bottom line, and it was like it was almost like he didn't know what to do with any limelight. If you went up and said to him, like, "Man, I think you're the business," and it was like, oh, okay. Clearly he knew it, but actually responding to it was something else.
Yeah, he was very sweet and but very shy around people. And no one's that great at taking a compliment, I don't think. But his transformation when he kind of got on stage and plugged in is quite extraordinary.
Yeah. I could do this all day. If anybody has any questions, by all means jump in. Start over there.
Well, when seeing festival, Murray's festival, to me it seemed like Mike Bloomfield had a kind of an arrogance. That's just my opinion. And then in Birth of a Band, Emerson, like in Palmer Isle of Wight, Keith Emerson had this like bright purple sparkly thing. And to David's point, Rory just seemed like a complete opposite of that. Like this guitar that was worn down, this kind of just not caring at all whatsoever that he was maybe this big star. Do you think that your grandparents kind of instilled some kind of humility to your father and to Rory that you know of, that maybe they taught him not to be too proud or anything? Do you know?
I don't know huge amount. My grandfather wasn't really around for them, but my grandmother was a beautiful woman, and she was. My father, Donal, and Rory were the only siblings, and my dad's got the best manners I've ever met of anyone. Anytime a woman enters the room, his chair's out, stood up. He does everything
Opens
for
the
anyone.
car door, that kind of thing.
He would run across the street if he could. He'd run through traffic to help someone or whichever else. And I think that did come from their grandmother, Mona. And I think there's that. I think as far as how Rory sort of dressed down in sort of just jeans and a check shirt rather than wearing leopard print or a dragon. That was at the time it was Hendrix and Jimmy Page with dragon prints and everything, and then Rory with check shirt. I think part of it. I think he had a great foresight that things will go in and out of fashion, and that a pair of Converse and a pair of jeans and a check shirt probably won't ever fall out of fashion.
They're popular every day.
And so you hang out in Bushwick now. He looks like a lot of guys out there now.
Well, it's funny. I was listening to the CD of the show this morning, and when you got to "Blister on the Moon," the last song in the CD, I was listening to it, and the whole riffing structure and the power of the thing. It occurred to me that you could actually hear that now, being a young guy, not knowing anything of his history, and think that could possibly be Nirvana, if Nirvana was a blues band. It's that basic, and that sort of, all the frills are cut away, and there's also a real edge to it, and the riffing and the structure of the song.
One of my first thoughts watching, when I saw the footage the first time, was that it was Nirvana at Reading. Is it 92?
Yeah.
And it's the three-piece, the leather jacket, just throwing himself around stage, just complete, and then just being lost in the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know, just really. My brother was such a Nirvana fan, so he kind of shown me every bootleg and everything, and I remember seeing that and just thought it was really comparable. And Rory, definitely grunge before grunge.
Grunge before it had a name.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Definitely for Europe, he was very understanding. I don't know if in America everyone was just used to dressing like that, but I think in Europe, everyone from Johnny Marr obviously said, but I even heard a thing with Adam Ant, and who you think is very flamboyant. He says, no, but when I was like 12 to 15, I just dressed in check shirts and jeans because Rory Gallagher did. So, in Manchester, Liverpool, London, they probably had to bust them in because it wasn't a staple. And I know Rory loved coming to the States because he could go and get the latest pair of Levi's or whichever, his latest check shirt, the next 10 for the next month or whichever he was going to wear. Because I don't know if as an American watching him, you're like, oh, he's just dressed like Bob down the bar.
But actually there's a working man's aura about that look, and that was something that when I started seeing him live myself, you would see him come out and it was like, this is all business. It's not, there is showmanship involved, but it's not the kind of showmanship where it's about lights and, smiles and, kind of prancing around. This is the kind of showmanship where you go up and you drive and you project and you get that across in your performance. And in a way, by dressing down like that, it sort of elevated the workmanlike, the working class quality of his art, which was blues, which was a working class art in itself.
I think he was very aware of his background upbringing. They lived above a pub in Cork. They were very working class Irish, and if my dad's right, and Rory sort of picked that up from the blues, and that's what kind of one of the reasons why he was so in tune to it. I can see then why they dressing like say working class American blues thing would really suit why he'd have gone for it. Because also I think just before Taste, all the show band stuff, he had to wear a suit the whole time. And then when he started out about 14, and then I think once he got to about 15, he'd become so important in the show band. He convinced them all that they should be more trendy and be more beat, so they wore black polo necks and he got them to change their name from the Fontana to the Impact, so it was a bit more like that. And he
was a bit more showmanship,
he was,
and he led on.
Yeah, in the film we did, Ghost Blues, about Rory's life, and overall with Johnny Marr, he kind of said this thing. He says, he kind of had to have known. He says when he looked out and saw, like he said, because there was one night him and about 50 other kids stood outside a venue in Manchester, and Rory sort of signed everything. Because when he looked down that line and saw everyone dressed like him, he must have known that it was kind of like catching on. It wasn't just like, oh no, everybody dresses this way. He must have known that he was having this. It was working for him. That check shirt and jeans,
It really did. Is there any? Okay, we'll start there and then we'll go up there.
Actually, this is more for you, being a music writer and living through the time. If taste had gained a little bit more commercial success, do you think it would have changed the sound of rock that was coming out in that 70s era, or even modern day now?
I didn't get to see Taste when they did that U.S. tour, but I think that, this is pure speculation, but I can only imagine if they had toured America the way Rory toured America in the 70s, they probably would have had a really big impact. Getting on a bill with Blind Faith and touring around America like that, there were loads of people who saw him who probably didn't hear him on the radio like I did. And he comes out and he's just this protean force on his instrument with this killing rhythm section. You can imagine it would all have been in the same effect as when, Jimi Hendrix first showed up in America, opening for the Monkees, and people are like, wow, the world has changed. I got up this morning and suddenly the world is totally different. I think he could have had a greater effect more immediately if the band hadn't broken up and had come back to America, which in effect I think actually would have been the best thing for them. Go back to America and headline the Fillmore. Go into these arenas like the Spectrum, Philly where I'm from, go into these places, just keep blowing people away. But they broke up. So in a sense he had to start over again, and he didn't play again in America until like 74 maybe? 73?
Maybe the Boomerang tour in 71, 72.
I think 72.
Yeah, that was his first tour.
Okay, so
Definitely.
it's still
He
2
had to-
years.
he had to really start again.
You lost,
Yeah.
2 years at that time was a lot to lose.
Yeah. He lost a lot of momentum, that the band breaking up, and then I think he was restricted by Polydor from recording or doing anything straight away. I think he was told that he had like 6 months, or the manager, he wasn't allowed to do anything. And it was actually thanks to Peter Grant, Zeppelin's manager. He kind of weighed in and got rid of the lovely Eddie Kennedy, and scared him out of the picture, which I'm sure Peter Grant would do to
Grant's
anyone.
very good at that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's how Rory kind of got to go solo. But yeah, it took the wind out of him, and it took a little time. I mean, but he at the same time he recorded 2 albums.
Yeah,
In
those
71.
first 2 albums are fantastic. They're really, really great.
And then then in the next year he did another 2 albums. I think Polydor signed him for a 6-album solo deal, and he expecting it to sort of last 10 years or whichever, and he'd done them all within 3 years. So he delivered, just kind of didn't stop making music. And but not being back into the States, and he had to start again, because anyone who still had a lingering thing for Taste, it might not have connected it with Rory.
Yeah.
I mean, The Edge, from his whole interview, he kind of says, he didn't know. He knew all about Rory, and when he was about 15, he got a Taste Live album, and he had no idea they were the same until years later. He had no idea Taste was Rory. So and they are quite different in sound as well. It's still blues and stuff like that, but I think Taste is a bit more. That jazz,
they're
that
almost
free
a little
form.
more avant-garde in a funny way.
Yeah.
The way those songs get chopped up, and Catfish Blues goes on for 14 minutes. It's almost like the way John Coltrane would play My Favorite Things and just put it through all kinds of changes and everything else. Except he's the primary soloist all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty extraordinary. We had a question back there.
He, the drummer and bass player stayed with him, and they made a band called Stud. And
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I think they had 1 album. I don't know if anyone. They made 2 records.
2 records.
I don't know if anyone bought them. They were wonderful musicians, but Rory wrote. The 2 studio albums that Taste did do. Rory wrote everything,
Yeah.
bar the couple of blues numbers on the first album, and he led the band, and it was his band from Cork, and it's just such a shame that the manager did that to them.
Well, he did it to the first bass player and drummer, and then he did it
Yeah.
to the second bass
Yeah.
player and drummer.
It's,
I don't want to make him a villain, but
I mean, it's, sadly, I don't know if they'd been a bit older. I mean, that's the other incredible thing, that Rory's 21 in this film. And it's just, I mean, I'm 33 and can't play half as good as that. And I've been trying, but it's not getting me anywhere. And the other two guys are probably at 21, 22 as well. And
Yeah.
maybe if they were slightly older, or there was other people around that could have said. I mean, my dad, who was the tour manager, he's 2 years younger than Rory, so he's 19.
Mhm.
So you got this group of just turned 20-year-olds, and two of them are being told Rory's taking all the money. You want to know where the money is. Rory's got it all. And then when Rory asks where it is, the manager says, "Oh no, the other guys need it," and just did that to them, and took it. I think, it didn't get resolved to the Rory got Polydor finally signed over his share of the royalties in the late 80s, and the other guys got it in the 90s.
so, okay, this film took 45 years to come out. It took them 20 and 30 years just to get their money?
No, well, money going forward.
Yeah.
They never got any money for any of the. I mean, On the Boards was top 10 album in the UK. They were very, very big gig-wise, and they should have been earning thousands and thousands. So no, they didn't get anything.
Yeah.
And there was no. I think that was one of the other reasons why I think it took a long time. As Rory, as long as he was alive, I don't think wanted to ever sort of look back on it. There was some talk of a reunion in the late 90s, but I think he'd spent a fortune getting the contract with Polydor set up back to him, and then tried to do the same for the other two guys, and trying to deal with Eddie Kennedy and his estate. So once it finally sort of happened, I think the idea of someone come up to him and said, "Oh, let's get this film out,"
Yeah.
he'd have gone, "Well, no, I'm playing tomorrow here. Film me here." That would have been his attitude. So. That's another for the delay. I think he'd always wanted to kind of whatever he was doing tomorrow would be more important than something.
In talking to John Wilson for the film, the drummer, did you ever get the sense that he regretted the way it went down? Because he doesn't actually mention that.
He has sort of said he regrets that they because he says that they never sort of openly fought.
Yeah.
It was just very much, Rory just stopped talking to them, and they stopped talking to Rory, and they'd all be sat in the same tour bus, not talking to each other, with my dad driving. And, like my dad says, a very uncomfortable ride down to the Isle of Wight. And then they broke up. Then Polydor said, "You can't."
Yeah.
And they said, "We booked you for a tour for the end of the year." So that was end of August. They broke up. They kind of were allowed to break up on New Year's Eve. That was their final show in Belfast. And I think for that period they just didn't talk, and John Wilson kind of got back in touch when Rory started resolving everything, and it was all exposed that the manager's taken it. And he kind of, he sent letters to my dad saying he was very, very sorry that how everything had gone down, and all that sort of stuff I'm slightly out of. I can't. He's such a good drummer as well.
Yeah.
And it's just he's in that Mitch Mitchell sort of brilliance. And so I've spoken to him once, twice on the phone, and it's just I had to keep saying to him, it's just such a pleasure hearing you play.
Yeah.
Really, really great.
Is there anything? Oh.
Yeah.
Probably more of a comment. I'm one of the people that's well aware of Rory Gallagher, but not Taste. So I'm pretty well flabbergasted at seeing this for the first time. And it occurred to me that, going back to what this gentleman said, while it's a shame that if they hadn't broken up, maybe some would have influenced somebody to do something else. It struck me how important this film is. I mean, first of all, it sounds so amazing. It sounds like you're there. So you're there, so you're experiencing it in a way that my thought was, okay, when we grew up, we were listening to these guitar players who had listened to Muddy Waters, and we went back and found that. Well, it's 2015 now. Maybe, the band broke up and nobody knew, but somewhere, some young kid may see this and is going to discover this and go, wait a second, I don't have to be snapped to a grid. look what this guy's giving me permission to just stop and riff and be John Coltrane. And maybe what didn't happen years ago just might happen yet when someone sees this for so many reasons. How about, I'll just tune my guitar like this, you know, I don't need a freaking tuning, you know, electronic tuner, it's just, you know, da-da-da, I'm done. You know, can be done.
Yep.
There's so many things that I think about when I see this film that's what struck me. It's just so important of a film for musicians, for young kids who might just see this, and yet he may, you know, 20 years from now, maybe some make a film and go, yeah, I saw this film on Rory Gallagher, and then that's how I got permission to be able to play like this. So,
I mean, I hope so.
extraordinary movie.
The other thing of just, you know, music as it's made now is in every kind of form, from, you know, from a guitar to laptop to everything, and just the sheer basic rawness of how they performed and what they used to make that happen. Like I say, I mean, the only thing besides the amp is his Dallas Rangemaster booster, which I mean, really all that is boosting treble, and you know, it's working a couple of frequencies, but there's no distortion, and the sounds Rory gets out of the guitar by just sheer will and sort of kicking it.
Yeah. And that little was it copper slide?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of copper piping that he used for slide, you know, and then he'd use pill bottles and other things like that. That, you know, if you want to, then you really can come up with, you can make music in the most basic possible way, like they did. You know, and there are people. I mean, I'm sure, you know, It Might Get Loud film, and you watch Jack White build this sort of like one string guitar thing. And, you know, there's people that are doing it. And it's people, I mean, but even, it's always outstanding, the people who kind of get into Rory, who then you don't think their music sounds anything like it. Like Ed Sheeran just said that the first song he ever learned was A Million Miles Away, and a Rory number, and you kind of, I don't see where it goes into his music. Johnny Marr's another one. Brian May, I hear a bit more of it, but it's, I mean, I think a lot of people that he has and probably will be like someone's first guitar hero, and then they'll find their way from there. I think that's something that really comes across. Slash, the same thing. It's just like, that was my guy, and, you know, and then I found my route.
But there's also the comments that Geldof makes, because, you know, his music and his band, the Boomtown Rats, they weren't a power blues band by any means, but his whole thing about, you know, here I am, an Irishman, and I'm seeing an incredible performance by guys from my corner of the world, and they're turning on 600,000 people at a level that's equal to Hendrix and the Doors and ELP, and that caliber of performer, not just musician. For him to have that, it just goes to show you that it's, yes, I think the musical element is really important, but there's also this element of someone's going to take notice of what can be done on a stage of any kind, and in any, you know, in any way. If I've got something to express, this guy gives me the license to do it.
I think so. I mean, I mean, the Edge has said it before. He says, you know, if Rory hadn't been there, like, would they have been able to pave the way to do that? And an Irish band come out and do that. And Niall Stokes, he's the editor of Hot Press magazine, which is Ireland's first and still pretty much only music magazine that's kind of a bit more cultural and lifestyle now. And Rory put the money up for that, and that's U2 got big because Hot Press championed them from Dublin and said, we've got to make this band happen. And Rory saw that, you know, Ireland didn't have any infrastructure to have gigs. And Geldof, I've seen in a BBC thing, said, look, you know, we had to, you know, there wasn't someone you go and get, oh, I do rock posters for you, or I do flyers. You had to go and get them done yourself. And that having Rory there, who kind of recognised that Ireland didn't have any of this, but had somehow made it out, that he came back and put money into it so that people could be a musician and come out of Ireland still. And it was great of him to do it. And him and my dad set up that, and they did the first ever outdoor festivals in Ireland. They put them on, I mean, pretty much with a truck that they stood on, and they played, and, you know, they play in the field, and the next minute, you know, the Edge was at that one. He was 15, and that was his first ever gig. And, you know, he goes home and practices, and they played Madison Square Gardens 8 nights in a row last month. And one of their big things now is sort of moving montage.
Yes,
And there's a bit
there
of
is-
the Edge,
yeah.
the Edge playing guitar in it, and he goes, and Bono said in one of the things, someone told me that he just goes, that's the Edge at 15 trying to be Rory Gallagher,
Yeah.
you know, and that's where they are. They're in Madison Square Gardens doing 8 nights in a row, and it's by, you know,
And
thanks
Rory,
to Rory.
and Rory never played at Madison Square Garden.
I think he, on the Blind Faith tour,
Okay,
Free
that
got
would have
that,
been on
no,
the
no,
blind.
but they didn't
Yeah,
get
but
to,
no,
I think
Philadelphia.
Free did it.
Philadelphia
He sub-
That's right,
yeah.
Free, yeah.
And then he did, I think, one, is it the second venue to Madison Square Gardens?
Oh, there's that, yeah, there was that theater, and, the Felt Forum.
Felt Forum, yeah,
Felt
he did.
Forum.
They played
Didn't he open for
Fricke of Rolling Stone?
He opened for Aerosmith at Central Park.
Yeah, but they went to the show at the Garden. They came into New York, they stayed, and they played Philadelphia. They were actually at the show
Mm-hmm.
the night before, and then they went down to Philly the next day because they came in because I was friends with Charlie McCracken at the time, and they actually came into New York and the next night they started. But they played the Folk Forum. They played the Folk Forum 2 nights.
Do we have any other questions? I know we're getting
Yeah, one
long, so
I got one.
we'll start there and we'll come back to him. Yeah.
I was just sort of surprised to learn that Rory was incredibly reserved and almost shy. And, do you have any idea how he was able to reconcile sort of his personality off the stage and sort of the almost flamboyant way he did to play on stage, and sort of how he consisted of personality?
I think he did say in a few things that it definitely was like a crash when he got off stage. And if you see the Irish Tour film, he kind of, like back in the dressing room, kind of all the other guys are like passing Guinness around and the rest of it, and you just see, he kind of just, it takes him a while to kind of recover from a show. I don't know whether he just saved up all his energy and kind of was quiet and did his thing like his normal day, and that's why he wasn't an extrovert in real life. He kind of bottled it all up until he went out on stage. It's the only thing I can imagine, because I don't know how else he kind of can go from those extremes unless he's holding something back until he's there doing the thing that he loved. That's him. I don't know if that solves it or anything.
Well, that would explain sort of the glazed look I saw on him backstage when I had my picture taken with him. It was just like, but then he had just, even at the bottom line, which was kind of a showcase club, man, he just burned it up for like 70 minutes, and it was just, you know, and especially in that proximity, it's a 400-seat room, actually, probably not barely the size of this, and it was like being in the middle of a furnace.
I remember seeing, the first time I ever saw him, I was about 7 or 8, live this is, and because he'd be over for Sunday roast with my family every Sunday if they weren't on tour. And so going to see him, first time I think was the Hammersmith, I'm trying to remember which venue it was, but
The Palais or the Odeon?
I think the Odeon.
Yeah.
And it's been, I think it was like 1987 or so, and there'd just been a hurricane. And we got side of stage with my dad, he put Rory t-shirts on us. And then Rory was playing away, and then he just sort of saw us, me and my older brother got so excited and started duck walking and machine gunning us with the guitar. And after the excitement of it, I was kind of like, who the hell is that? You know, it just wasn't the Rory that would kind of like be very, you know, quiet around us and cut your meat for you and all that sort of stuff. It was kind of eye-opening. And the other thing is, I always thought he said he was a magician.
He was.
He always said musician, and I always thought you meant magician, because he always used to do a chewing gum trick with a handkerchief for me. And there would be a piece of chewing gum, and by getting to do it so many times, he'd obviously run out of chewing gum. So he kind of like, no more. But so I always thought, when you say I'm a musician, I thought you meant magician.
Well, he was a magician. That he was actually being very, very honest. Why don't we take one more?
I just want to say you guys did an amazing job on it. It was worth the wait. Eliot, you did a great job on the mix. Sounds fantastic. And you know, Daniel, the Rory catalog has been so exposed in the last 10 years or so with all the various CD reissues. It's great to finally see the Taste stuff get its day in the sun between this release and the box set that's coming out. So it's really great to see that. I had a question for you. You were commenting before how the drummers you were comparing him to Noel Redding. And one thing you notice when you watch this movie is I'm sorry, I meant Mitch Mitchell. You know, you notice how incredible this rhythm section is. I mean, these guys are amazing. My question to you, as a musician, how would you compare these two guys to like the classic Rory lineup? The guy, I know he had, various drummers throughout that, but how would you compare these guys to, let's say, the most classic version of Rory as a solo artist, that rhythm section?
the most classic, I'd say, people think of that period from Blueprint to Calling Card, which was Rod Diath on drums, Jerry McAvoy on bass, and then Lou Martin on keyboards. So obviously Lou Martin's on the side because he's a keyboard player. I think technically John Wilson is the best drummer I've seen Rory play with. I think, I mean, it's a different thing because Rory solo stuff, they don't have that stopping and starting thing, and it is very much Rory and the song he's written, and these guys support him. Where in this, it's, I think everything has to be on the spur of the moment. Like if just what they're playing, and you hear Rory pick up what Richard McCracken might be playing on bass, and he starts doing a bit of it, or vice versa. Yeah. Technically, I think they're the best musicians. I think that trio is on a par with everyone in the other sort of best of trios at the time. I don't. John Wilson isn't as, let's say, powerful as John Bonham, but I think the technical excellence is there. I'm not a drummer, but I'm amazed by him. And then
he's also got a smaller kit.
Yeah, he's got
and
much
doing
smaller
that stuff.
Yeah. And then that's why I think Mitch Mitchell and him are quite comparable. I think it's a bit more in the roles and the things that they're doing. It's that touch of jazz, which I think John Wilson and Rory both got into. It's a shame that I don't think Rory did a bit more of it in his solo career, because it was obviously, I mean, you'll see on the DVD we've got there's the full performance of him playing saxophone in If It Happened Before, It Happened Again. It's a long song title, and you know, I think that those two just brought out something extra in his playing. I think they just pushed him further, and I think he put, and then so if Rory sort of with Rory solo, if Rory would go in and write the album, the guys would get together, rehearse it, and record it, and go and tour it. I think this was more of that band in the sense that Rory would be writing the song and sort of go, I've been listening to this, you know, Coltrane album or Dolphy or whoever, and these guys would be listening to it too, and they'd be, oh well, I've this technique or whichever. It seemed a bit more organic a band, and I think that's why Rory got pushed a bit further in it. Right. They're more involved in it completely. It's taste rather than Rory Gallagher and taste.
Well, maybe 45 years later, but it's like this movie's going to put these guys on the map. Besides expose taste, it's really going to expose what an amazing rhythm section he had that I never knew about until I saw this movie. I had no clue.
I hope we can find some more stuff of them as well, so that people can see more of it. And then we just got to convince Jeff to put out another film.
In the meantime, see this one as much as possible, because this is the third time I've watched it, and I'm far from bored.
And it's a shame Murray's not here, because you'd all get a treat meeting him. I'm sorry that he couldn't be here, but he's very upset to miss it too. So
he brought great stories, and thank you for the insight. Daniel Gallagher?
However you want to say it, Gallagher.
Gallagher? Okay, the Irish is Gallagher.
Second G is silent.
The second G is silent. Eliot Kissileff. Okay. He did the Sonics, producer, Rory Gallagher, John Wilson, Richard McCracken. What Goes On, Taste, live at the Isle of Wight, August 28th, 1970. It looks like 4:30 in the afternoon.
Yep.
See it as much as you can.
Thank you.